Today, the modern professional Santa world celebrates its Silver Jubilee. This year's Santa Reunion marks the 25th anniversary of the birth of the real bearded Santa phenomenon, a professional community which has quite literally improved the quality of Christmas for everyone who celebrates this holiday. The past quarter century has witnessed the formation of hundreds of professional Santa groups, along with countless schools and academies, conferences and conventions, and an ever-growing support industry, from custom costumers to belt and boot makers to reindeer ranchers. And they all have one thing in common. They can all trace their roots back to the third Sunday of January 1995 and to the rustic charm of Clearman's Northwoods Inn in La Mirada, California. Inside, sitting around a table directly beneath these perpetually snow-covered eaves, were 10 professional actors who had met the preceding September when they'd all been cast as Santa Claus in the same TV commercial. German mail-order giant Otto Versant had just landed the world's biggest supermodel, Cindy Crawford, to appear on the cover of their fall-winter catalog, and they decided to celebrate by shooting the world's biggest Christmas commercial. Casting calls had gone out to agents throughout the Southwest, stipulating that any candidate submitted must have own costume and real beard. 10 men were selected, and on a sunny September afternoon, Universal Studios' Brownstone Street set was transformed into a winter wonderland. The theme of the commercial was, "Our catalog has so many gift ideas that Santa's going to need help delivering them all." To the dulcet tones of Eartha Kitt's Santa Baby, 9 of the Santas scrambled in and out of the doorways along the sidewalk, bumping into each other in their haste to distribute huge armfuls of wrapped gifts, while the lead actor, Santa Tom Hartsfield, sat contentedly in his sleigh, thumbing through the catalog. During the shoot, which lasted nearly 13 hours, these guys did what most professional actors do. They swapped war stories about their most and least favorite gigs. At one point, Santa Ed Murphy suggested that they come up with a name for their little group. And when Hartsfield, recalling that casting call they'd all responded to, whimsically suggested the Amalgamated Order of Real Bearded Santas, the name stuck instantly. As the commercial shoot finally began to wind down, one of them suggested that they should all get together sometime and do lunch. After their upcoming holiday seasons ended, of course. None of them realized as they sat around that rough-hewn table laughing that their little clatch would be remembered forevermore as the first annual Real Bearded Santa Reunion. They had so much fun that, to a man, they agreed to meet again at the same place on the same Sunday of the following year, and this time a couple of the founders decided to bring along another Santa whom they knew. By the third year, most of those in attendance had invited a Santa friend or two, and so the Santa luncheon began to grow quite rapidly. Santa Tom Hartsfield, the lead actor in the auto commercial, soon became the de facto leader of this informal gathering as well. It was Hartsfield who collected contact information from each new guest and personally made sure that he was invited to the next luncheon. It was Hartsfield who took most of the pictures at these early gatherings, who paid for lots of copies to share with the others, and who spent his own time and money to mail them out. By the start of the new millennium, however, Hartsfield was beginning to feel a bit overwhelmed, and he knew just who to ask for help managing the group. You see, one of the new visitors that year also happened to be one of the most famous Santas in the world, Santa Tim Conahan. So the surprise wasn't that Hartsfield asked Conahan to help, but that Santa Tim was able to find the time to do so. Thanks to his personal and professional connections, Aorb's media profile began to increase rapidly, and so did the number of Santas who came from all around the world to join the fun each January. By 2003, the luncheon had clearly outgrown its birthplace, and over the next few years they tried a number of venues, including 2007, when an unexpected surge of last-minute registrations completely overwhelmed the Windsor Salon on board the Queen Mary. It was also during this time that the vendor fair became a regular feature of the luncheon. In addition to the official group photos, it had become customary for attending Santas to pose for professional portraits as well, which were now being compiled into an annual yearbook. In 2005, Mrs. Clauses began to appear as well. The vendor fair first began as a humble clothing rack, which held a few items of theatrical quality Santa apparel, which guests could borrow for their portraits. So many of them, like me, asked where they could purchase such suits as these, that Adele's of Hollywood was invited to present their wares, which prompted Santas to invite other vendors with products and services they knew would interest their fellow jolly gents. And so the vendor fair eventually became one of the major attractions at the Sunday luncheon. And when the reunion expanded to include the Saturday before, so did the vendor fair. That expansion came in the form of a meet and greet for local Clauses to welcome the out-of-towners who had traveled in for the event. And it didn't take long for this to take on a life of its own as well. In just a few years, it grew from a handful of Clauses at a nearby hometown buffet into a crowd which practically filled the red section at medieval times. In 2008, we changed our name to Fraternal Order of Real Bearded Santas, formed a board of directors, and with the blessings of the state of California and the IRS, became a 501c7, a mutual benefit, nonprofit membership corporation. To those without a law degree, a professional fraternity. This prompted the next expansion of the Santa Reunion. With the addition of professional workshops and seminars, certain reunion-related expenses qualified as business tax exemptions. So reunion planners began securing event spaces at the host hotel on Saturday, and our most experienced and expert members and associates took turns sharing their wit and wisdom with those eager to learn from the best. Of course, all those guests gathering for a full day of workshops and seminars would be hungry, so the president's breakfast was initiated. And with all those guests already in the hotel on Saturday, our vendors decided not to wait for the Sunday luncheon, and so the vendor fair was expanded into a 2-day event as well. By this point, it had become absurd to call the Saturday evening meal a meet and greet, since most of them had spent the entire day with one another. And so Saturday gradually became dinner and a show. For several years, we went out together, like medieval times, where we were such a crowd favorite that they actually dispatched the king himself to the next day's luncheon, along with our Red Knight, who, by the way, won while we were there. As it began to dawn on reunion planners just how deep and wide was the pool of talent represented by our guests themselves, the Saturday Showcase was born. We've been amused and amazed by some of the greatest Clauses in the world, who also happen to be, say, one of the greatest magicians we've ever seen, or a gifted musician so talented that he inspires others to pick up an instrument, or professional singer-songwriters sharing tunes written just for us, or a mesmerist who can turn a stage full of grown-ups into a menagerie of epic hilarity. Or just a handful of normally serious folks letting their hair down and being silly. The next expansion of the reunion was practically inevitable. With so many guests now arriving on Friday night for the next day's events, someone suggested resumption of the traditional meet and greet, except now it takes place on Friday night. Another milestone was the addition of off-site excursions during the day on Friday. Since we'd outgrown Northwood's Inn, about half of our Santa reunions had been hosted by Knott's Berry Farm Resort Hotel. They love us, and over the years, America's first theme park has repeatedly called on Forbes to help them launch a new ride or restaurant. One year, in a heated bidding war with a nearby resort to host the reunion, Knott's offered to toss in an all-day pass to the theme park for every guest. Knowing that many of those guests traveled from all over the country to join us, it only made sense for them to use it while they're here. And so Friday morning was added to the official itinerary. There have been a couple of recent exceptions to this 3-day weekend format. In 2012, the San Diego chapter experimented with adding an extra day of workshops on Friday, moving the meet and greet to Thursday night. This resulted in a 4-day reunion that year. The other exception to the 3-day format occurred in 2017 and just sort of naturally evolved from a bonus feature following several earlier reunions. In 2008, a number of our guests decided they didn't want the fun to end after the Sunday luncheon and booked themselves onto a cruise to the Mexican Riviera. They posted all the fun they were having to various Santa sites on the web, and when word went out the following year that another cruise was being considered, twice as many guests signed up. By the third year, our numbers had tripled. However, when a survey was sent out before the 2011 reunion, planners discovered that enthusiasm for a follow-on cruise had begun to wane. Because the Mexican Riviera cruise was pretty much our only option for that time of the year, and some felt we had done it to death. And so, as reunion planners gathered in San Diego for the 2016 reunion, one of their tasks was to decide which chapters would host the 2017 reunion and where it would be held. As options were bandied about, members of the planning committee discussed various features and highlights of previous reunions, which inevitably led someone to fondly recall the Santa cruises we used to go on. And that's when Diva came up with one of her best ideas ever. Why not combine the two and have the reunion on a cruise? This idea was immediately the most popular among those present and remained so despite the eventual realization that this would make it all but impossible to have a vendor fair that year. We determined that the cost of the cruise was roughly equivalent to the combined cost of registrations and accommodations at the average reunion, so our guest list would pretty much be limited to those who could take not just a weekend off, but the next 3 work days as well. As it turned out, we needn't have worried. Over 100 Santas and Mrs. Clauses attended the 4-day, 5-night event, which was the 2017 Santa reunion. We had our meet and greet the first night, then spent the next day exploring Catalina Island. The following day, we disembarked in Ensenada, Mexico, boarding buses for various excursions. Diva and I enjoyed a visit to the world-famous Blowhole. That year, we held our traditional Sunday luncheon on a Tuesday, as the Carnival cruise ship Imagination cruised around in international waters, then returned home to Los Angeles the following morning. So, we gathered today to celebrate 25 years of Santa fraternity. And as new generations of jolly gents wake up one day, decide to put away their razors and join the Christmas corps, it is our sincere hope that this reunion will be here for them over the next 25 years, providing each with the opportunities we have enjoyed for peer support, professional enhancement, and the sheer pleasure of sharing the company of the finest folks we've ever met. Happy 25th birthday to the modern Santa world.